Hogan Gidley was the communications director for the Huckabee Campaign, and he joins me now. Hogan, good to see you.
Great to see you.
So Trump takes home 60% of the vote, practically winning all 95 delegates that he needed. Mathematically, he's saying on the campaign trail yesterday and today that that mathematically it sort of rules out Ted Cruz unless it gets to the convention.
Do you remember when Ted Cruz won Texas and he went to the podium afterwards and said, "I won my home state, big deal"? No, that's not what he said. He said it was a sweeping victory for him and it was an important moment for him. The same thing's true for Donald Trump. It was a big night for him. Ted Cruz's whole argument to this point basically has been, let's get Kasich out, okay? Because the establishment, all they want is a contested convention. It would be a dream for them to have a contested convention. Kasich needs to get out because he's mathematically prevented from getting the delegates needed. Now, Ted Cruz is mathematically prevented from getting the delegates needed. I wonder what he's going to say about it now. He can't win the nomination at this point, but he can stop Trump from getting it, or at least he can try. Last night, though, was a big step forward for Donald Trump to move into the northeastern states. He'll probably do really well next week. And then that Indiana fight is something we really need to be paying attention to, because if he can win that state, if Donald Trump can win that state, it's going to be very, very difficult to stop him from getting the delegates needed to win the nomination outright.
And one interesting side note that we did talk about earlier is that Kasich won Manhattan.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He sure did.
And that's where there's Trump buildings all over the place.
That's right.
And his point is that if it gets to the contested convention, that he can make the case that he's more electable should he have to face the eventual presumptive Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton.
Three things, if I can remember all three. I don't want to do a Rick Perry moment here. One of them is, but he can't win his own party's nomination. Two is, it's going to be muddled moving forward because now Kasich is probably going to perform better in the northeastern states than Ted Cruz will over the course of the next week or so. So he will end up being in second place in a lot of these states. And so the argument again becomes, who is the anti-Trump here? Are we going to all rally behind Cruz, or are we going to rally behind Trump? But Kasich obviously has no chance here. What's interesting to me moving forward is going to see where these two candidates actually end up, because they can cancel each other out. They can somehow work together to try and prevent Trump, but the momentum is going to be such that it's just going to be very difficult at this point. Each time, Trump had a horrible month of PR, did a horrible job. He was engaging with Heidi Cruz for whatever reason. He said some bad things about abortion, about punishing the mother, and then all of a sudden he stopped and he turned his attention on what he should be talking about, which is the voter. The voter's being disenfranchised here. His campaign strategy is, we're winning the votes. Ted Cruz says, don't worry about the voter, let's focus on the delegate. And so the sweet irony here is Ted Cruz has been bemoaning, deriding the establishment, the Washington cartel, since he got in the Senate. And now he's looking to and needs the establishment to even have a prayer or a hope or a chance to somehow be the nominee. It's very fascinating.
So what are the delegates to do? I mean, you go to the convention. Most polls say that voters want whomever receives the most votes to be the candidate, whoever receives the most delegates, I guess I should say.
Right, and I think it should be that way. I think about 72%, I think CBS polling shows that 72% of Republicans say whoever's in first place, once we get to the convention, deserves the nomination, should win the nomination. And the reason is, we've talked about this on both sides. The Republicans and the Democrats have both been kind of pushing the Bernie Sanders wing and then the anti-establishment wing on our side as well, is basically saying the system's rigged, whether it's Wall Street, whether it's TPP sending jobs overseas, whether it's the border, the system's rigged against Americans, okay? This would just further the narrative that they've been putting in place for the last year, that the system is rigged for the establishment types. And the point I do want to make that I didn't get to was, let's talk about the convention and the delegates. The rule is still in place. The 40B rule is still in place. We affectionately call the Ron Paul rule, which was put in place by the Romney campaign to prevent Ron Paul from making hay after if Romney didn't somehow win on the first ballot. The irony of that is the rule put in by the establishment, by the nominee, the Romney team, to prevent an uprising is the same exact rule that would prevent a John Kasich from even being submitted for nomination, because you have to win at least 8 states to be put in for nomination. Now, could they change the rule? Yes. And that's 2 days before the convention. It's 121 members. I had a long meeting with both members of the Rules Committee from the state of South Carolina, where I'm from. It was fascinating, and you're going to hear more about this wonkish rule. You're going to hear more about the process than we've ever heard before. And if it were up to me, if I were director of programming at CBS, I would put a camera inside that. What'd you say?
Yeah, hint.
That's right. That's a hint. They should put a camera inside that Rules Committee and go live, because it's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch those folks debate that rule. Do they change it? Do they leave it in place? Because if they leave it in place, you can't have a white knight. You can't have a Paul Ryan. You can't submit anybody else. It can only be Cruz or Trump.
Okay, but here's the question then, Hogan. If they make a change to those rules, and you've heard Donald Trump out on the campaign trail, he's sort of sending out a sort of dog whistle to his supporters that the establishment is trying to derail his candidacy. And if it comes to pass that they decide to do something like that, it could get ugly at that convention.
Oh, it's going to be really ugly. It's not a dog whistle. He's flat out saying the system's rigged, it's terrible, it's worse than the Democrats.
But it's worked for him in some cases, but he's throwing out the perception to his supporters.
Question, but the shift has gone. Like I said, he was bemoaning deriding the RNC for a while, and the RNC pushed back and said, these are the rules. Just because you didn't know them, it's not my fault. He stopped the bleeding. He brought in some more seasoned political operatives and said, let's focus instead on the RNC, who can push back on us, and the rules have been in place forever. Let's focus on the voter. The voter is the one getting messed over here. And if you focus on the voter, it's a win-win all day long. And Cruz, and it was a great line in the Wall Street Journal, the op-ed that Donald Trump put in. He said, I'm going to win. I want to win because of the voter. Ted Cruz is trying to win despite the voter. And that's a very powerful argument, especially in a year when we're talking about the underdog, the outsider, saying we're getting messed over by the system. If that happens at that convention, it's going to be absolutely chaotic. And I don't know what we do. Look, let's say Trump loses on the first ballot, or doesn't get all the delegates on the first ballot. Do you think all of them then are going to shift to Cruz and Cruz win on the second ballot? Probably not, because there's going to be some wrangling even still. So I don't know how many votes this thing could be. I still think in the end, I'm hopeful that we get this thing solved. I'm hopeful someone like Trump pulls it out ahead of time so we don't have such a contentious convention. But it's a lesson in politics to see what we're doing. And these rules, I want to say from South Carolina, for example, we have a rule in our state convention. And each state is nuanced, and this is what's so tough for someone running for president, because you have to fight so many battles on so many fronts. You basically have two elections, one for president and the one for these delegates on the undercard that you need the money and the infrastructure and the know-how to actually to win those. In South Carolina, you cannot be elected to the national convention as a delegate unless you were first elected to the state convention in South Carolina the year before. That means you have to be involved in party politics for at least 2 years before your name can be submitted as a delegate. It's a coveted position, okay? That rule is in place, has nothing to do with the presidency. It has to do with the hundreds of thousands of elections we have in South Carolina that have nothing to do with federal politics. It has to do with everything from the land commissioner to the governor to the local state house, to the state senate. Everything at every level hinges upon getting those rules set in off years so that when there is an election, we're ready to go.
It is a lesson in civics that we're getting this election season. Thank you so much, Hogan Gidley. Appreciate it.
Thank y'all.